very soon.
People and just where
Yeah.
reading the visuals awaiting the release waves and people start just location because it's one of its final strongholds. It's a city that is largely intact. The IDF, because we know that hostages are being held in the city, being used as human shields, and so the IDF has, of course, been careful not to operate there. So Hamas showing President Trump and the world that they are very much still in control of Gaza. That not all of Gaza has been destroyed. In the war, and so very strategic, very see the pickup trucks. I mean, lines and lines of cars, lines of terrorists in full military gear with their guns. So it's all really a show to U.S. President Donald Trump, to the world, that Hamas is still very much in control of Gaza and that it's not going anywhere.
I think it's important to know in a time like this is they want to show that they have a stronghold of the Gaza Strip. But let's remember that their own people, Gaza, these Palestinians, have also had no food, no electricity, living in these campsite locations, a lot of them in makeshift tents. The weather here in Israel has been atrocious. We've had winds coming off the coast like no other. We actually had an earthquake off the coast of Greece. Why am I telling you this? Because I'm telling you this that Hamas doesn't care about their own people. If they did, they wouldn't be trying to have a show. Remember, Hamas started this war on October 7th. That is the fact of this. And there's only hostages because Hamas refuses to give them up. Palestinians have only suffered because of Hamas. If Hamas wanted to put their weapons down, return the hostages, Palestinians wouldn't suffer. And I bring this up because we see this stronghold happening now. We hear people cheering um, just more waiting game. Sites for this. And we just learn as we go when it comes to this.
Sometimes bringing hostages out early ahead of schedule, sometimes like today, delaying their release. They were supposed to be released at 8:30. They have now delayed it. It's after 10 o'clock, and we're still waiting for the first of the hostages. Red Cross has arrived at pickup scene. We're seeing 3 Red Cross vehicles, and for some reason there is we're still waiting for the hostages, the first images of the hostages to come out. Hamas playing games again. They're setting up, we saw them all morning setting up a stage, positioning cameramen all around.
I think truly since 7 a.m. this
7
morning,
a.m. Yeah,
and we're still here. It's about 3.5, almost 4 hours later,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're still waiting for this to happen. We've said there's delays for possible political reasons. Clear, but just remember, you don't know what's going on. Remember, they're not getting all the facts that we are. They're just being thrown into these situations. Again, they were held against their own will. And now they're also in a state of limbo. What's going on? They were probably told you might be released. You are being released. And now you wonder what their mental state is. Okay, am I being released or am I not?
And you've seen sunlight, have not seen daylight in months. And so we really don't know the condition that they're coming out in. It's going to be, for many, it's a shock to suddenly come out, suddenly see sunlight for the first time. months. Suddenly see people the first time in months, and so it's quite a shocking situation for them. We don't know their medical condition. We don't know their psychological condition. Hamas, we do know, like to. It appears as though they've been held in good condition, but of course we know that's not the case.
Right. And we've seen some of these hostages walking out. Some of them look a little bit more frail than others. Some of them look strong. Said, actually, this was the brother of Ofer Calderon. He said, "What you see from the outside is not what you see on the inside." He said this at a press conference this week. He said, "Don't let the photos fool you. There is a different story on the inside. The rehabilitation process is lengthy and it will continue to go on. And every day is hard. Every day has its ups, its downs, and that's him today. When you watch the coming out of Gaza, no, they might look strong. There is a 16-month story you do not know of what they
Okay,
endured.
we're seeing something happening at the scene. We're seeing the cameras being picked over. So there might be one of the just waiting to see approaching.
It looks as if they're here.
We don't know if it's going to be each hostage released individually for them to drag this out,
Sure.
or if they're going to release two or three at once. We're waiting to see. Hamas doesn't exactly announce its plans ahead of time.
It
We're
seems as if
waiting.
these cars are actually starting to enter at this point.
Yeah.
You see these Hamas terrorists putting this whole show on, standing in the street. Like we said, this is a very different location than what we've seen in the past. There's a lot more people, and it seemed as if there's a lot more Hamas armed terrorists in a particular order.
All wearing masks, of course, to avoid identification by Israel. We see them fully masked. And in contrast to sort of the civilian clothes that they've been wearing the past 16 months, fighting and hiding amongst the civilian population in Gaza, using them as human shields.
Correct.
As well. And so we see a vehicle, but it's unclear if the hostages are inside or not. We're waiting to see. We see a lot of people pulling out their camera phones in anticipation.
Yeah, and this is a moment here in Hostage Square. People are on the edge of their seats, literally on their toes, trying to guess who this might be coming out of the car. I mean, we're learning all of this information as this video comes out. I mean, the only people that know what's actually happening is Hamas at this point. Israel doesn't even know who's the first hostages to be released. But I know there really is silence here in Hostage Square. This is what happens. People are waiting. They'll erupt in cheers once they see this person coming out of the car, but they're all just trying to get a glimpse of imagining someone for 491 days tucked away in the worst form of humanity possible on this planet Earth.
We're seeing not just in hostages square, also scenes of family members, friends, and members of kibbutz Be'eri, all gathered together in the kibbutz for Elisha.
With Ohad, we have two hostages that are leaving that are from kibbutz Be'eri today, and that's why this release means so much to them. We know that Or Levi, we've reported a Nova survivor. He survived Nova, and he was then taken into Hamas captivity. And so,
Right. He's from Rishon LeZion, from central Israel,
correct.
and he just happened to be at the Nova Festival.
Yeah, and let me just give you some form of an inch of who this man is. He was known as, his brother has said in the past, as a child, he used to break things just to fix them because he's really good at fixing and problem solving. He started a startup in the Tel Aviv area, I believe in tech, and he was a traveler. He like for an experience. Just moments before they arrived, actually moments after they arrived, the rockets started going off from Gaza into southern Israel. They made 2-year-old son at the time, and bomb shelters, which we know unfortunately has an infamous name.
We're seeing the car now making its way. We're seeing one car making its way into the center. Unclear if the hostages are inside, if there's one hostage, if there are any hostages inside this car.
Got it.
So we're waiting to see. It's reversing now. So a lot of maneuvering. And of course, all of this, we have to say, being staged the stage to set up the cameras. Oh, and here we're seeing now another pickup truck entering with many Hamas terrorists standing in the back of the pickup truck at the transfer site, but it's still unclear who.
Wow. Take a look at this pickup
now more
truck.
cars arriving.
Take
now
a look at this pickup truck.
A van is arriving. It's likely that the pickup truck was accompanying in the back. We're seeing more cars entering now. A van flanked by 2 pickup trucks. So it's likely that the hostages are inside this van, but we still don't know. Waiting for the first images of these hostages. We're seeing.
And a third van is
door
here.
Opening.
Third van has arrived. Another van has arrived. And look at these pickup trucks. You see Hamas terrorists on the back side of the bed of the pickup truck, with their weapons pointed upwards. They're in their full masks. They're fully hiding their identities. This is not a civilized society, and that's critical to note. These people want to rule the Gaza Strip. You can see it's ruled by terrorists, and these innocent hostages are stuck. They've been stuck in a system that they were not supposed to be in, taken from their homes, taken from bomb shelters. These 3 men have been through hell and back. We're just waiting to see who comes.
Game and Hamas once again taking their time, drawing this out, building up the drama, building up the tension. It's all for show. We have to remember that everything we're seeing now is all for show. Hamas men making their way towards the stage. We're seeing one of the Hamas terrorists going up on the stage. They are preparing for the signing ceremony, most likely. And again, I want to point out earlier in the broadcast, Colonel Amit Asa also pointed out that the sign that we're seeing today on stage is a new sign.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new sign, and it's sending a very clear message to U.S. President Donald Trump. They wrote in Arabic, in Hebrew, and in English, "We're the flood." The flood, of course, referring to Al-Aqsa flood, what they call the October 7th massacre, and the war's next day. So they're essentially sending a message to U.S. President Donald Trump that we are here the day after. We will rule Gaza the day after. And whatever plans you may have for Gaza, you can forget about them because we are here to stay. And now we're seeing one of the Hamas terrorists making some sort of declaration on stage.
It's unbelievable that this is what we see. It feels as if it's a movie. You watch this,
and that's the point. It's staged just to come across as though it's some kind of movie PR show. That's the point.
I mean, to go through this, as us, we're analyzing every moment of this,
week after week.
Right, and we see the same antics. Actually, we see the antics getting worse and worse, if you ask me, and from our reporting, from seeing it firsthand through this live stream. But you see, like you said, he's reading something to the crowd. Remember, the crowd is handpicked people to likely be there. People that support them, people that they're bringing to this area for a reason. There's no need for a declaration to be read. This isn't, remember.
It's for show. It's part of their show.
Right.
We have to remember that. Today, they really are putting on a show. I mean, really, if you compare, as you said, to the last couple times that we've seen today, putting on a show. They're taking as really forced massive armed terrorists, and we're seeing now the Red Cross. We're seeing the Red Cross um, represent their cars and making their way ceremony. So they're going to go up on stage, do this little signing ceremony, part of the show, and then only then likely will the hostages exit the van. And we don't know again.
Terroristic feel that we're seeing on the live stream here in Hostage Square is uplifting music. So the two combined, it's a bit of a strange reality. But here in Israel is they don't want people here together right now. It's purposeful, it's tactical. There's no need for it at all.
No need for it whatsoever.
No. And these documents that the Red Cross right now is handing back and forth with these terrorists, likely some type of senior commander he's working with. What comes next?
So it's all for show. We have to remember that as we're seeing this is completely just a show of, and the rounds they finish signing these documents. The van that's flanked by two cars, one in front, one behind, of Hamas terrorists, and we can expect to see the first images. Again, we're seeing pictures of
There's more cheering here in Hostage Square. Everybody,
here we go. We see someone exiting the van, and cheers are
unclear who it is at this moment.
It's
the person
unclear.
Is still being shielded in some capacity.
cheers, absolutely.
We're trying to get a glimpse of who this
We're
could possibly
seeing
be.
one of the hostages making his way to the stage. It's still unclear who this is.
Whoever
He's
it is,
flanked by Hamas terrorists.
he's on his own 2 feet right now, walking. Wow, wow, wow.
Ohad Ben Ami, you know, he's walking on his own 2 feet, being supported quite heavily by the two Hamas terrorists.
Wow, to see these families in this live stream
And
right now.
he's wearing sunglasses, probably to shield his eyes from the sunlight because he's been held underground.
Just look at the emotion in these families. They have that zero sign of a moment they will never forget. He's on his own 2 feet. He does look a lot thinner than his images and how he was taken.
He looks very frail, and he looks as though he's being propped up by the two Hamas terrorists. He on his and he's got sun's on his eyes, most likely sun. We know that many of these hostages have been held underground, and we're seeing have been released. So we have seen now the first images of Or Levi, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami. Ohad Ben Ami being propped up by the terrorists. He looks very frail. Each standing on stage right able to stand on their own. Uh, they look very frail. So much better medical hostages. They're shielding him now, but they're propping him up. So we do know, unfortunately, that these three hostages are being returned.
אם את או אתה שוקלים להוציא ספר לאור, רציתי להגיד לכם שעכשיו זה הזמן. רוצים לדעת...
Were tragically murdered on October 7th. So we are seeing 3 weeks, these sort of, here we see 3 men who are very frail, who we don't see sort of these, we don't see the waving, and
it seems as if there's a terrorist that keeps going over to Ohad.
No, they're interviewing Ohad right now. That's what we're being told. They are interviewing Ohad right now, but it's unclear what he's saying. It's unclear what they're asking. We can't hear that here, but they are interviewing him on Al Jazeera, and so we don't know what's going on, but they're, again, really putting on a show. We have not seen this before. We've seen simply the transfer, and
it's the first time we've seen men. Like last weekend, we didn't see Yarden Bibas and Ofer speak to a Hamas camera, right? And they use the women as a tool to do that, right? We saw the female observers, the first to be released. We saw Emily Damari and them actually speaking to the camera. They made a whole video, but when it comes to the men, remember, it's for a reason. So this is definitely different from what we've seen in the past. And it's important to note that you have these families watching this it's upsetting to see, but it's exciting to see. A lot of these hostages have described this moment as a rebirth for them, a renewal, a brand new take on life as they're given a second chance at life. So you see these three men on stage. It's hard to watch because you know that they look a lot thinner.
I think that's also another interesting contrast. We're seeing really this show that Hamas has put on. It's a much bigger show than they've done in previous weeks, and we know from the previous hostages that have already come back that Hamas did not let them speak on stage. They were much more defiant, much more adamant. Here, what to say, perhaps. These men not in a good state, not psychologically, not physically. We're seeing their family members in tears, psychological warfare on the part of Hamas. We're seeing Eli Sharabi really looking.
He looks very thin.
Very frail. Very
remember,
frail.
This is the last form of torture they're going through. This is the last step. Hamas said, not only will you be in captivity for this long, but we're going to make sure you remember your last moments in Gaza. Absolutely. The humiliation that their family to Israel. I don't even think they probably realize.
They're just going through their procedures right now, waiting to be transferred into the hands of the Red Cross. You know, this is all for show. They have no choice but to go along with it. The Red Cross not even intervening here to release these hostages from Hamas. You know, they're standing aside, letting these three men who've just been in captivity for 491 days, who can barely stand on their own 2 feet. They're letting them, allowing them to be interviewed on stage. Really just ridiculous scenes that we're seeing here. And these three men have no choice but to go along with it.
This is Or Levy right now speaking to this terrorist who put a microphone in his face. Or Levy will be returning to his 3-year-old son who's been waiting for him, asking where his father has been, his mom, who was brutally murdered on October 7th. This man has been through hell. He was taken from the Nova Music Festival. He was taken in the back of a pickup truck. We know that. So remember, the way they're being treated now tells a different story. They were taken in the most gruesome, barbaric ways possible. It's hard to believe that human beings have the ability to inflict so much pain on others. It looks as if this terrorist has concluded his interviews. He has raised his hand up in the air, almost showing a sign of victory. That's what it appears to look like.
That's what Hamas is trying to portray here today. They are trying to portray a sense of victory. They're trying to portray strength. They've put elaborate show for us today. And in Hostages Square, they're announcing that we see the three hostages, and we see that they're trying really to embarrass them. We see now that they're coming off stage. We see Ohad being really held, propped up by these two Hamas terrorists. And all three are now making their way over to the Red Cross vehicles. Now, once they get in to the Red Cross vehicles, they will be driven over to the Re'im base. They'll first be transferred over to the IDF, and only then can we officially say that they are in Israeli hands.
That's correct.
Are going to be driven over point for the IDF. They'll be taken to
the Red Cross vehicle. Ohad was just put in.
Yeah, so we're seeing the three men entering the Red Cross vehicles. They're about to make their way over to the transfer to the IDF. They're going to the Re'im military base. They'll undergo sort of a preliminary medical examination, after which They'll also be reunited with their families, and then, depending on their medical condition, will be taken either to hospitals here in Tel Aviv or flown into hospitals in Beersheba and Ashkelon further south.
Yeah, you know what's also interesting is I'm thinking about the other hostages that were taken captive that have been released, right? I don't know if they ever watched these, but to think like they were in the same shoes just a few weeks ago, for them to finally be able to of what's actually happening, the unbelievable scenes that we're seeing in Gaza right now. We have these two Red Cross workers being
Taking instructions from Hamas.
and surrounded by them. Look, as the Red Cross, they're probably very fearful going into this territory, but there is no control.
No, the Red Cross operate in Gaza. They have done absolutely nothing. They do have leverage on Hamas, and they have not used it at all. They have not made any public statements calling on Hamas to, let them visit the hostages. They've not made any public statements asking Hamas to at least let them know the status or the conditions of the hostages. They've really been absolutely silent this entire time, taking all of their instructions from Hamas, playing along with all of Hamas's games. They've used none of the leverage that they have to help any of the hostages. They've done absolutely nothing. Their silence has been deafening. And the only time we do see the Red Cross in action is when they are picking up these hostages and delivering them to the IDF. Really, really despicable behavior, despicable actions from the International Red Cross that has proved to be absolutely useless during these past 16 months.
So all three men are in the Red Cross vehicles. I want to say that the Hostage and Missing Families Forum, they just released a statement. They said, quote, the disturbing images from the release of Ohad, Eli, and Or serve as yet another stark and painful evidence that leaves no room for doubt. There is no time to waste for the hostages. We know that phase 2 of this deal is currently being negotiated. We said it's in more of a fragile state. Part of phase 2 would be the rest of the hostages, men under the age of 50, soldiers. These men will be in captivity longer than these 33 people that are set to come out in phase 1. The conditions only get worse, and the hostages that have been released advocate every single day to make sure these hostages are out, because every day spent is an extra day in hell. And that's what's critical to remember, is that every hour that's more, every second, every minute is just another form of torture these people are going through.
Absolutely. And I want to recap for our viewers. Right now, we're seeing images of the massive crowd that's gathered here at Hostages Square. And now we're seeing, once again, the images of the three hostages being paraded on stage. I just want to point out, that this time around, Hamas has really put on a very, very elaborate show. In previous weeks, we've seen the hostages able to come up on stage and put up their hands with peace signs and victory signs. And today, if we can show that Hamas is essentially holding all three men, not allowing them to put up their hands in victory. Instead, the Hamas terrorists, we can see them raising their hands. They did not like these images of the hostages showing defiance that we've seen the past 3 months. It makes them look bad. And so today we see them very, very carefully controlling the hostages, very carefully humiliating the hostages, trying to put them through this last bit of humiliation before they transfer them over to the Red Cross. And so right now the hostages are in the car, in the Red Cross vehicles, making their way to the transfer point with the IDF, but really just showing the evil that is Hamas, trying to do sort of show that they are victorious, and one last humiliation is really what we're seeing. Now we're hearing, I just want to update our viewers, we're hearing cheers in Hostages Square, and that is because the IDF has just put out a statement that the Red Cross has transferred the three hostages into IDF hands. So the three hostages are now in IDF hands, in Israeli hands. They are back in Israeli hands after 491 days. Cheers erupting in Hostages Square. Really a joyous moment, a joyous occasion. And now they're going to make their way to Re'im.
Right. And at Re'im, they'll be able to change their clothes. That scene that we saw, when the video comes back up on the screen, Or Levy was dressed in military uniform.
Right.
He was taken as a civilian from Nova. He's 34 years old. He's not actively serving, likely in the military in the IDF. And you see on the screen right now, Ohad is also dressed.
They're all dressed in sort of
this military style, but you see how Or is dressed really in military. And then you have Eli and Ohad. Honestly, it looks as if it's a prisoner's uniform.
They're trying to draw this comparison between the hostages, trying to paint them as IDF soldiers or as prisoners of war, comparing them to the Palestinian terrorists that are being released. And of course, there is no moral equivalence between civilians, terrorists, and terrorists, civilians that were dragged out of their bed in their underwear, people who were at a music festival looking to have fun and taken captive into Gaza, and terrorists with blood on their hands, murderers who are being released. There's absolutely no equivalence, but of course Hamas trying to draw this sort of parallel between the two.
Yeah, and you look at Eli Sharabi, he's the hostage in the middle there. You look at him and you wonder, do you know if your family has been killed? He's coming back to Israel without the embrace of his two daughters, his wife. Does he know? And when will he find out? And will it be at Re'im, a military base? These are the moments that you wonder. And it's hard to be a reporter and to analyze these things because it really doesn't feel like it's our place to get into the middle of a family's ordeal. But when we know more than the hostages, it's our job to report the facts. The facts are that Eli's wife was murdered and his two children were too. And he will be reunited with his mother at Re'im, who's been waiting for him. His brother Yossi, his body is still in Gaza. He was taken as a captive and was declared dead by the IDF. These stories are physically painful to even say out loud, and these families have a hard reality ahead of them, but the strength of Israel is behind them, and you can feel that with the support that's here today. And I think that they are also aware that this country has hugged them in their hardest times, in moments of positivity, and there is a whole country waiting for them to come home. So they left hell, and they're about to enter a haven, a place that wants them back home, a place that is ready to embrace them, people that are ready to enjoy their company and to feel their presence again.
Absolutely. And so we're seeing the contrasting scenes, the crowds at Tel Aviv Hostages Square, and of course, the Hamas show in Deir el-Balah, a strategic location that they've chosen for today's release, one of their last strongholds in Gaza. And really this sort of last humiliation that they're trying to put these three male hostages through. And Shosh, as you said, it's a very bittersweet moment. You really have to be thinking what's going through their minds right now that their family members have been murdered. Do they know what's going on? It's really heartbreaking to think what is going through their minds, but there has to be also a sense of relief, a sense of joy that they're finally back home, that they're finally, after 491 days, being returned to Israel. And of course, we have to remember that there are still many hostages left in Gaza, in hostages where they're listing and naming each and every one of the hostages still in captivity in Gaza. And I just want to sort of talk about the next phases. So over the next 2 weeks, we are expected to see the release of 6 more hostages, 3 hostages next Saturday, and another 3 hostages the following Saturday. And in the last week, the 3 weeks from now, we're expected to see the remaining release of 11 hostages, the 11 remaining hostages, some of whom are still alive, others who we know are dead, coming back in coffins, and so clearly prepared for this very strategic show. And I just want to say that right now, what we're seeing are people here in Israel along the road leading to the Re'im base. They've set up lots of different locations, people on the roadside with flags, with yellow flags for the hostages, Israeli flags, signs showing their support for the hostages as they make their way back home.
Another thing I want to keep in mind for a lot of our viewers in the diaspora is we're expecting American Israeli Sagi Dakalhan to be released in this phase of the deal. Sagi has a wife, has children. His wife gave birth while he's been in captivity. This is a man that should be coming home in this phase. We're expecting him to over the next 2 weeks when we see the release of more and more hostages coming out. But there are hostages with multiple nationalities. Actually, I believe it's Ohad has German citizenship as well. Um, these are people that come from different countries. They have different backgrounds. This is a crisis that has and should have shaken the world, right? These are people that hold citizenship from all across the globe. But Sagi is one of those hostages that is American to come out. He as well as Idan Alexander along the border on October
I
7th.
think it's a good opportunity, as you mentioned, to remind our viewers that on October 7th, Hamas raped, murdered, and kidnapped not only Israelis, but people from countless different countries from around the world. And, you know, it's absolutely shaken Israelis to their core and shaken should have shaken the world as well. But unfortunately, we saw very little pressure from these countries to release their own nationals. But we have to remember that Hamas did not differentiate on October 7th. Not between Israelis, not between Jews, not between Arabs, and not between foreign nationals.
And not only that, it's official. We have 16 Israelis that have come out today. That is the number of hostages returned, in addition to 5 Thai
In this
nationals
first phase of the
that
deal,
were
right?
just released last Saturday. These 5 Thai nationals, they're not Israeli, but they're here for a better life, to make more money, to send their money back home to their loved ones in Thailand. And they were released last week. It goes to your point that they didn't just take or they took everyone captive. It didn't matter.
Didn't
If
matter.
anyone who was in the land of Israel was a problem to them, and they inflicted a lot of pain on so many people that ended up surviving these atrocities and now have to rehabilitate because of them. But these 5 Thai nationals were officially reunited with their families this week. These people really have been through hell. We know that a few of them were held together in pure darkness. They said that they would pray for the sun to come. They would pray just to see the lights of a car in the little bit inch of creaks in the floors that they could, or in the walls that they could, any form of light. They had a 24-hour captor near them at all times. And there was one hostage, Thai hostage, who said he prayed and he dreamed of this Thai salad he used to eat. And you think these little things that all of us might take for granted every day are things that these people wish for. And these moments that these 3 men that you're seeing on your screen right now probably had these exact moments, right? That kept them sane, that kept them to the point where they survived. You know,
Absolutely.
they survived. They survived 491 days, and that shows strength. And even though they might not be mentally as strong, they really are. They survived. They did it. They're on this stage, and they did it. And now they're coming home.
Absolutely. I mean, every hostage release that we've seen this first phase of the hostage deal, we see the resilience of the Israeli hostages. We see the resilience of all the hostages, the Thai hostages as well. I mean, this really is a testament to the strength, the resilience of Israelis, the support that their families and all of Israel has shown for these hostages. You know, they they've reported receiving messages of support from their families in Gaza as well, and really a testament of their mental strength that they've been able to withstand 491 days in Hamas captivity in the most brutal conditions, and make their way back home to Israel. And we know that right now we are waiting for official confirmation that they are back in Israeli territory. So they're making their way right now back to Israel, but we're waiting for the official confirmation that they are in Israel.
Yeah. I mean, look, these men might look different. They might look more frail. They might look thinner. Their heads might be shaved. But they figured out a way to get through this. They figured out a way to survive. And I hope that they survive to tell the stories that they went through. So this world doesn't forget the barbaric humans that live in Gaza, that rule Gaza, that hold their own people hostage and have no free will. The Palestinian struggle is because of Hamas, and that's critical to remember. This struggle is real. Israelis feel the struggle. We have Israelis coming out right now that experience that. We're receiving reports that the IDF is speaking to the hostages. They're in the hands of hostages right now. The hands of the IDF right now. This is a moment. Can you imagine? They probably dreamed of this.
And we're waiting. We see the people waiting to welcome them back home into Israel. So we're just waiting for the official confirmation. We're receiving word from the IDF that the hostages are in okay condition. I'm not going to say good condition. I'm not going to say great condition, but they're in okay condition. And they will be making their way to the Ra'im base, where they will finally be reunited with their families. And we should have the visuals of these these videos. I mean, they really bring tears to my eyes. I know to your eyes as well, and it's just really heartwarming to see them reunited with their families. And so we're waiting for these visuals today as well. And right now, we're just waiting for official confirmation that they've made their way back into Israel. But the IDF has spoken to the hostages, and so we're waiting for the official confirmation now. And hostages, I get a little bit less in the air as they know that they're out of Hamas's hands.
Yeah, they're out of Hamas's hands. They're not quite in the hands of the IDF yet. They're en route. I want to say that a lot of hostages that have been released, it's the first time they were speaking Hebrew when they see these IDF soldiers, right? We're hearing most of them are fluent in Arabic. Yeah, and the four female soldiers that were released together actually said to one of the pilots in the helicopter that they that they'll tell their stories one day, so people don't forget.
Absolutely. And we're, of course, waiting Israel. They're making their way back. Three men, Or Levi, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami, each with their own personal stories, some tragic, some are going to be reunited, their wife and kids, after 491 days. And again, we have next week 3 more hostages set to be released. Again, we don't know who they will be. Hamas releases the names only 24 hours ahead of time.
Yep.
But we're still expecting 6 more hostages in the next 2 weeks, and then another 11 hostages after that for phase 1 to be complete. And we do know that negotiations are underway now of the deal. And again, what we saw today, I just want to reiterate for our viewers, was really one of the most elaborate, if not the most elaborate show that we've seen Hamas put on during this first stage of the deal. They really came prepared today. They had, speeches. They had signing ceremonies. They actually brought in someone to interview the hostages, something they've never done before. So really putting on this elaborate show in a very strategic location, Deir el-Balach, one of the last remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza. So we're seeing a very different scenario play out this week than we've seen in previous weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And something the Israeli government continues to demand after Hamas has violated the ceasefire multiple times is they're demanding for the release of Kafir, Ariel, and Shiri Bibas. They have still not come out of Hamas captivity. They were supposed to be released in one of the first days of this first phase of this deal. Children, women, female soldiers, now men. Where are Shiri, Ariel, Kafir? I do want to read a statement that Yarden put out. It's his first public statement he made. He said, quote, on October 7th, I was kidnapped from Israel. On February 1st, 2025, I returned to a different country. I knew that the people of Israel unite in times of disaster, but I never knew to what extent. He continued to say that he thanks his family for fighting, the country for fighting alongside the IDF soldiers. He called them heroes. He said, quote, sadly, my family hasn't returned to me yet. They are still there. My light is still there. And as long as they're there, everything here is dark. He says, thanks to you, I was brought back. Help me bring the light back to my life. There is a demand for these children to come home, for Shiri to come home. Hamas has violated the ceasefire agreement by not releasing them. In addition, they violated it by delaying the times in which we were supposed to receive these names. They've also violated it by not releasing Arbel Yehud at the right time. She was also surrounded by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In addition to Gadi Moses, they were both held by PIJ. It's important to remember the history and the facts of this phase of this deal. As we report, we're going to continue to provide context because it's critical. As we continue to see these reunifications, we need to remember the start. We need to remember the facts that led us to that point. The fact is that Yarden Bibas is without his immediate family.
Yarden Bibas, Shiri Bibas, the Bibas children, Kfir and Ariel, have become a symbol of the hostages, the two youngest boys, the two youngest children in Hamas captivity, the red-headed, beautiful baby boys. They're the symbol, but there are so many other tragic stories like that of the Bibas family today. We're seeing Eli Sharabi, who suffered, whose family we still don't know the fate of the Bibas family. We still don't know the fate of Shiri, Kfir, and Ariel. And of course, the family has asked not to speculate. So we, of course, won't do that. But we are seeing, for example, the return today of Eli Sharabi, who we do know the fate of his family. Tragically, they were all murdered on October 7th. And so, in a very similar situation to Yarden Bibas, there's many more stories like that. And I just want to point out for viewers right now, we're seeing the helicopters, the IDF waiting to transfer the three hostages to the hospitals to be reunited with their families. We're still awaiting final confirmation that they've been transferred to the IDF, that they've made it onto Israeli soil. So we're still waiting for that confirmation. And in the meantime, we're seeing these scenes unfolding both in Gaza. Again, the elaborate show that Hamas put on for us today, for the world today. And also, we are awaiting the transfer of the hostages back into IDF hands, back into Israeli territory. So we're seeing cars making their way. It's unclear if those are the hostages, the Red Cross cars, or what. But we're waiting for that final confirmation.
Yes, and another hostage that's set to be released in this deal, in this phase, is Shlomo Mansour. He's the oldest captive right now, 86 years old, Holocaust survivor, still in Hamas captivity. He is supposed to be released in this first phase because of his age. He has not been released yet. In addition to Omer Shem Tov, who was taken from Nova. He has celiac disease. He has asthma. It's unclear why he
A
has
lot
not
of
been
them
released.
with very difficult medical conditions.
Very
Yeah.
difficult. And we know someone else has another chronic illness. We are waiting for them. Of course, it's very possible they could be released in the next few weeks. We do know more hostages will be coming out. That is critical to say. And no one will speculate on that people have died in captivity.
Daniela
Yeah,
Gilboa. Yeah.
Gilboa. We saw Hannah Kutz, I believe.
Yeah.
She
They
was,
said they were killed, Daniela Gilboa, back in November, and then she's already back home in Israel.
and actually one of the first statements she put out on her Instagram was thanking people for not believing the rumors.
Yeah.
She walked out on her own 2 feet after Hamas said that she was killed in an airstrike, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember these things, that you cannot trust a terrorist organization. You cannot trust what they say. Um, you know, and that's why you cannot speculate on the conditions of these hostages. And it's critical as journalists, as people in Israel, as people around the world. There needs to continue to be hope, because you truly never know who will walk out.
Absolutely. And
And
I think
yeah.
Israelis, and especially the Israelis here today at Hostages Square, are full of hope. We see it, we feel it, talking to people here, talking to the families. They are all full of hope. You hear that the hostages have made it back into Israeli territory. We are awaiting their reunions, and of course, a very joyous day um, that 3 more hostages are back, have been transferred over and are back. And we're seeing again people also waiting on the side of the road, waiting to welcome them back. So really, an incredible show of support by Israelis throughout the country.
Throughout, I mean, you see these people out here on Shabbat in Hostage Square, but on the street right now, as you can see, these yellow flags, Israeli flags. Last week we saw a Thai flag in the crowd.
Yeah.
For the Thai nationals that were released. It doesn't matter who you are, people in Israel will support you. And that goes to show. I mean, what you see is what you get in Israel, right? It's the reality. I always say that the morals of Israel is the biggest blessing and it's the biggest curse, all at the same time, because our the greatest enemies know how to penetrate that, right? Today we have Palestinian prisoners being released in exchange for these innocent lives, these innocent hostages. Because Israel values life, the price they pay is having to release people that are serving life sentences in Israeli prison. People that have committed serious crimes that have been convicted. They went through a judicial process to get to this point. Um, People that have been involved in bombings and shootings and stabbings.
A lot of terrorists with blood on their hands. And we know that this is the cost of the deal, but Israel is willing to pay that price because it values life, it values the lives of its hostages, and it wants to see them all returned home. So we are now just waiting to hear. The hostages right now are making their way into Israel. We are waiting for that final confirmation that they've crossed into Israeli territory. It's we're hearing now in Hostages Square. Sadness, tears of joy. They're playing very moving music in the background, and really just waiting for that final confirmation. And you know what? We've just received word that the hostages are now in IDF hands. They are officially, now we can say for sure, they are officially back in IDF hands. They are with the IDF. They are back in Israeli territory. And I think with that, we're going to wrap up our live broadcast. But before we go, Shosh, I just want to hear, and now they are announcing it on the speaker, on the megaphone, that 3 hostages are now in IDF hands, officially back in Israeli hands after 400. Final thoughts on today.
It was a delayed day. It was never supposed to be this late. We were expecting the hostages to come out around 8. It ended up being one of all three, and maybe that is the area. They are alive. They stood on their own 2 feet. They walked out, and they're now in the hands of the IDF. And this is probably a day that they dreamed of, and it's a day that's coming to fruition, and it's happening. And they're about to be reunited with their families. It's exciting.
Absolutely, it's very exciting. Very, very emotional, very joyous day today as we see the release of 491 days in Hamas captivity. I just want to recap for our viewers, what we saw today was a very, very elaborate show put on by Hamas, something that we haven't seen before in previous releases in the past few weeks. And of course, we're waiting now. They're in IDF hands. They're going to be transferred to the Re'im military base to undergo sort of a preliminary medical examination. And after that, they're going to be transferred helicopter to the Hal or Sheba or Soroka Barzilai, and there they will be reunited with their families. And so really a wonderful, another joyous day, another 3 hostages back home. And of course, you can continue to follow ILTV for all of the latest updates, for the videos, the emotional videos of the reunions. And of course, we'll be here next week again as Hamas is expected to release 3 more hostages next week. Thank you to Colonel Amit Asa for joining us. Thank you to Shosh Bedrosian, and thank you to all our viewers for tuning in.